I'm going to start out by giving you some of the history. So the Women's Health and Sex Diversity in Medicine Center, which we refer to as WHSDM, was actually started in 2010 with a strategic planning process by our former dean, Phil Pizzo. And we had a planning group that was the former chair of OBGYN, Jonathan Barrick, Linda Boxer. You can see other names that are in black that are no longer here, but they were like leaders of Stanford at the time. Laura Roberts is still here, chair of psychiatry, and David Stevenson is still here. And we also had 18 faculty that met for 2 years. We did a big process. And if you've ever done strategic planning, you know that one of the things you need is a mission and a vision statement. Our vision statement was healthy women and men from conception through the life course. In retrospect, that was kind of non-binary. I mean, that's too binary, and we probably would have changed it if it was in today's time. Our mission is advancing human health across the lifespan through research and education in women's health, biology of sex differences, and gender medicine. And so we launched the program in 2013, January of 2013. And at that time, it was funded by all of the departments in the School of Medicine and matched by the Dean's Office. We were kind of set up for 3 years to see, is it successful? We were considered a success, and we were approved to continue funding in that same mechanism. And then in 2020, a lot of changes happened in terms of just the funding mechanism, and so the Dean's Office committed the funds to keep us going, and we've continued to continue. We have 1 year now that we're finishing up, and we hope that we're going to continue, but we have to go back through this. We did change the name in 2024 to Women's Health and Sex Diversity, thinking that sex differences was a bit too binary, and we wanted to go beyond differences and also include similarities. We do have an advisory board. I admit that we haven't met recently, but you'll see a lot of familiar faces. These are really leaders in the School of Medicine that are committed to our cause. This is our website, and I've got the link there for the website. And when you go into these sites, you can actually learn a little bit about each of these people. So I thank very much our advisory board. And we have representatives from every department in the School of Medicine that help us get the news out, help us come up with ideas. We have the basic science departments, and we have the clinical science departments. You can see we are missing a few that where you see our logo, those are ones where we need to replace. We need to get new representatives. But that process has worked very well for us in terms of just keeping our eye on the ball in terms of what's happening in these different departments that relates to women's health and sex diversity. We have an educational mission, and I want to start out just with a few points, is that one of our really early goals of WHSDM was to host the Organization of the Study of Sex Differences here at Stanford, which we started working on as soon as we launched. And we were the host in 2015. So we had people from all across the country and other countries come to Stanford to talk about sex differences. I also want to mention Gender Innovations, which is a project here at Stanford. Londa Schiebinger, who's, you can see her photo there, and I started actually working on both WHSDM and gendered innovation ideas at the same time. Londa has really taken this to great heights in terms of EU is what's funding it. It's actually very, very popular in Europe and in Korea, and a lot of people in the United States know about it as well. I also put up here the Office of Research on Women's Health to kind of make the point that they have been very important for us as well. One of the things that they did was come up with sex as a biological variable as a mandate at the NIH for all the research studies. And at the same time, a lot of work was being done to get sex and gender health education into the world. And so I'm showing you here the Sex and Gender Health Education Summit, which actually the first one was in 2016. So 10 years ago, we just had our 10th anniversary at the Mayo Clinic, and they had the funding to bring one person from every medical school in the United States to be at that meeting. And it was a very, very exciting meeting. We thought the whole world is going to change, and it was if you've ever been to the Mayo Clinic, it's out in the middle of nowhere. So I was like, really? We're going over all these fields and we're going to this amazing thing. But fortunately, I got to be the person for Stanford that went to this big event. And there was a very exciting follow-up meeting 2 years later, but then the pandemic hit. And I did become part of the scientific program committee. We were very excited, and then the pandemic hit. And so we had to have the next one virtual, and then the next one was virtual. We did put together a Stanford panel. Actually, it wasn't just Stanford, but I did bring up some of our best people to look at intersectional issues. So it was someone from just about every sex orientation and gender, not every because there's so many, but gender identities and something else, some immigration issue or something else, so that we could really talk about how everything is very complex. It's nothing binary. Everything has got multiple features to it. But it was a time when we actually had some problems. At the same time, I was also working on what came up here also in the animation was I was a member of the Office of Research on Women's Health Advisory Committee and got to play a big role in the strategic planning for that period of time. There's a new strategic planning plan now at this time, but it was something that I feel like Stanford was being represented in a great way. The next one was live in 2025 last year in Boston. We funded Benji Lanakea to go and represent Stanford at this and to really talk about LGBTQ plus issues at the Sex and Gender Conference. And then this year I actually presented some of the work that we did that also came up while we were talking. And this was the work on gender as a sociological variable, which took a lot of work. We were trying to figure out, okay, now we have sex as a biological variable, but people need to understand gender as a sociocultural variable. And we did a lot of work to try and figure out how do you measure gender. And it's really quite complex. I'm actually going to Hawaii for the OSSD meeting and presenting there this year. So I feel like we've really done what we set out to do, even though it's kind of a small group of us that are doing this work. For our educational mission, we have worked trying to get in the medical school curriculum here at Stanford the kind of information that we think every medical student should be getting. It turns out to be quite challenging because unless it's on the boards, it just doesn't make it into the curriculum. We also are a scholarly concentration. We have an application on women's health and sexual and gender minority health. This is actually largely because of Leslie Subak, who's here, who brought an amazing sex and gender, sexual and gender minority program to Stanford, which is really one of the leading programs in the country. We also teach a lot of classes. So I teach a class on sex and gender and human physiology disease. I teach a class on health impact of sexual assault and relationship abuse, which is a major public health issue that goes kind of untalked about, which is unfortunate. I also have a sexual function and diversity medicine that has queer health and medicine embedded in it, which is an amazing seminar program. And we wanted to get some global medical issues, and so we actually brought in an expert, Clea Sarnquist, to create a course for us. Actually, we had created the course, but we needed somebody with real expertise, and so Clea took that on and offers that every year. And she and I also put together a class on gender and intersectionality that we aren't offering at the moment. And I also do an intro sem on challenging sex and gender dichotomies. We do have a big basic and translational research symposium on sex differences every winter. We have an annual Women's Health Forum, which is what you're doing today, and we do have some special programs in the fall. In our basic and translational research program, we started this actually before Wisdom was funded. This was the beginning of Wisdom. We were doing this through OBGYN at the time, and we had the first big meeting on Beyond X and Y. We did this with the Cardiovascular Institute in particular, but we had all 5 institutes of medicine at the time. And then we followed up with the Cardiovascular Institute in 2012 and had Vera Regitz-Zagrozik, who's the director of the Institute of Gender Medicine in Charité, Berlin, or was. She's now retired. We then went through a whole series of programs with each of the institutes of medicine doing one with neuroscience, doing one with immunology, one with cancer. We did with cardiovascular health and neuroscience. Then we had our special program on YX sexy chromosomes with the Department of Genetics. We did one on conception through puberty with the Maternal Child Health Research Institute. We did one on the sensorium, looking at differences in vision, hearing, smell, and sexuality. We did one in cancer. We did one in pain. This was during the pandemic. We did one, another one on genetics of sex, which was last year in this room. It was really great. All of our talks are on our YouTube channel, and you can go to our site to get that. Most recently, the one we did this year in February was sex differences in autoimmunity and immunology of infectious disease, with the group that actually got a score, Special Center of Research on Sex Differences, to look at these very questions. We also have this annual forum. We started that also early on in 2010. So our inaugural Wisdom Forum was 2012. And then we had keynote speakers. So these are the different programs that we've had over the years. Again, all of these talks are on YouTube channels that you can see from the past. We did actually forego 2017 because we felt we wanted to acknowledge Leslie Subach coming to Stanford, which was a great event for us. We then had one on gender matters with the Stanford Population Health Sciences group, really trying to make people realize that you can't just look at the biology of sex, you need to think about gender. And then we had Kirsten Bibbins Domingo, who was the chair of the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force that particular year. And you can see we partner with all of we do all of these in partnerships with other departments. We had a big one on women's global health. We did sexual and gender minority health. That one had to be virtual. And then we kind of shut down for a while because our funding had dried up a bit. And last year we got going again. We did a whole women's health pavilion at Stanford Health Matters. We're going to be doing that again this year. And today we are here doing adverse pregnancy outcomes in cardiovascular health. And with that, I'd like to just lay out kind of where this came to be. So there's a study that you're going to get to hear about in more detail from Virginia Wynn called the EPOCH study. And what I wanted to point out is that we did a life course approach. So the design of this study was that we wanted to find out what is it about adverse pregnancy outcomes, specifically preeclampsia, that predisposes women to risk for heart disease. So if you're not aware, about 10 to 20% of women have adverse pregnancy outcomes, and your risk for cardiovascular disease goes up tremendously by having had that history. And so this study was one in which basically in phase one, we had 3 cohorts in mind. One was a pregnancy cohort where we would identify women when they were pregnant before we knew if they were going to have preeclampsia or not. And then one would become a case and one would become a control. Others that had different adverse pregnancy outcomes were not studied. And then we actually got blood from them, and I think you might get to hear more about that from Dr. Wynn. But the point was that we wanted to find out what happens. And a lot of stuff happens to women that get preeclampsia compared to women who don't. The midlife cohort were women who we had given birth at Stanford and that we had records for, and we could find out, did they have history of preeclampsia or not? And they were still premenopausal, so this was the midlife group. And do they still have something in their blood? And so that was the midlife group. And for the later group, we actually did the Danish blood bank, where the Danish population has almost everybody in their population in their database with blood from basically with history of did they have preeclamptic pregnancies or not, and did they get heart disease or not. That one didn't quite pan out, and so we really want to look at the Women's Health Initiative, which is where we get Nisha Parikh, to try and figure out, can we find another cohort that can give us these insights? And with that, I'm probably going to need Amy here to tell me how to get to the next talk.